Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of It's Old News 250, where this may be news to you, but it's old news. This week's news was reported between December 27th and December 30th, 1773. This week's episode starts in Philadelphia, where 17 ships entered the harbor, 7 left, including the ship Montague that we learned about in a previous episode, and 24 cleared the custom house. For the entertainment of the curious, Mr. Kinnersley, having lately made some considerable addition to his electrical apparatus, particularly having added an elegant case of 70 bottles, each lined and coated with tinfoil, he proposes to exhibit a course of electrical experiments at the college in this city on Monday and Tuesday next week, and again on the following Wednesday and Friday, to begin at 6 o'clock in the evening. In this course, consisting of only 2 lectures, about 40 curious and interesting experiments will be exhibited, tending to show the nature and properties of lightning, and which is of the greatest importance, how to avoid the danger of it, how to secure houses, ships, from receiving any damage by lightning. The following particulars will, it is presumed, he thought no inconsiderable part of this electrical experiment: flashes of real lightning visible under water, iron heated red hot and even melted by lightning, whilst under and in contact with common cold water. Experiments on that wonderful electric stone from the East Indies called the tourmaline, which will become electrified by being dipped in boiling water, one side electrified positively, the other negatively. A curious representation of the astonishing electric eel lately seen in the city, on touching of which, while in the water, an electric shock may be as sensibly felt as from a live one. A representation of part of the starry heavens, exhibiting a variety of beautiful electric stars. As the knowledge of nature tends to enlarge the human mind and give us more noble and exalted ideas of the author of nature, and if well pursued, seldom fails producing something useful to man, it is hoped that an entertainment of such a tendency will meet with suitable encouragement. Those gentlemen and ladies who purpose to attend these lectures are requested to be furnished with tickets, that no money may be taken at the door. Tickets may be had at the bar of the London Coffee House and at Mr. Kinnersley's house near the college at $50 for each lecture. Electrical experiments cannot be well exhibited in damp or wet weather. Therefore, if either of the evenings above appointed should not prove dry enough, the exhibition must be deferred till some dry evening after. The first lecture of each course to be on Monday and Wednesday evenings, second lecture on Tuesday and Friday evenings. Monday, December 27th, 1773. The unanimity, spirit, and zeal which have heretofore animated all the colonies from Boston to South Carolina have been so eminently displayed in the opposition to the pernicious project of the East India Company in sending tea to America while it remains subject to a duty, and the Americans at the same time confined by the strongest prohibitory laws to import it only from Great Britain, that a particular account of the transactions of this city cannot but be acceptable to all our readers, and every other friend of American liberty. Upon the first advice of this measure, a general dissatisfaction was expressed that, at a time when we are struggling with this oppressive act, and an agreement subsisting not to import tea while subject to the duty, our fellow subjects in England should form a measure so directly tending to enforce the act, and again embroil us with our parent state. When it was also considered that the proposed mode of disposing of the tea tended to a monopoly, ever odious in a free country, a universal disapprobation showed itself throughout the city. A public meeting of the inhabitants was held at the State House on the 18th of October, at which great numbers attended, and the sense of the city was expressed in the following resolves. First, that the disposal of their own property is the inherent right of free men, that there can be no property in that which another can of right take from us without our consent, that the claim of Parliament to tax America is, in other words, a claim of right to levy contributions on us at pleasure. Second, that the duty imposed by Parliament upon tea landed in America is a tax on the Americans, or levying contributions on them without their consent. Third, that the express purpose for which the tax is levied on the Americans, namely for the support of government, administration of justice, and defense of His Majesty's dominions in America, has a direct tendency to render assemblies useless, and to introduce arbitrary government and slavery. Fourth, that a virtuous and steady opposition to this ministerial plan of governing America is absolutely necessary to preserve even the shadow of liberty, and is a duty which every free man in America owes to his country, to himself, and to his posterity. Fifth, that the resolution lately entered into by the East India Company to send out their tea to America subject to the payment of duties as it's being landed here is an open attempt to enforce this ministerial plan and a violent attack upon the liberties of America. Sixth, that it is the duty of every American to oppose this attempt. Seventh, that whoever shall, directly or indirectly, countenance this attempt, or in any wise aid or abet in unloading, receiving, or vending the tea sent, or to be sent out by the East India Company, while it remains subject to the payment of a duty here, is an enemy to his country. Eighth, that a committee be immediately chosen to wait on those gentlemen who, it is reported, are appointed by the East India Company to receive and sell said tea, and request them, from a regard to their own character and the peace and good order of the city and province, immediately to resign their appointment. In consequence of this appointment, the committee waited upon the gentlemen in this city who had been appointed consignees of the expected cargo. They represented to them the detestation and abhorrence in which this measure was held by their fellow citizens, the danger and difficulties which must attend the execution of so odious a trust, and expressed the united desire of the city that they would renounce the commission and engage not to intermeddle with the ship or cargo in any shape whatever. Some of the commissioners resigned in a manner that gave general satisfaction, others in such equivocal terms as required farther explanation. However, in a few days the resignation was complete. In this situation things remained for a few days. In the meantime, the general spirit and indignation rose to such a height that it was thought proper to call another general meeting of the principal citizens, to consider and resolve upon such farther steps as might give weight and ensure success to the unanimous opposition now formed. Accordingly, a meeting was had for the above purpose, at which a great number of respectable inhabitants attended, and it appeared to be the unanimous opinion that the entry of the ship at the custom-house, or the landing any part of her cargo, would be attended with great danger and difficulty, and would directly tend to destroy that peace and good order which ought to be preserved. An addition of 12 other gentlemen was then made to the former committee, and the general meeting adjourned till the arrival of the tea ship. Information being given of that, the price of tea was suddenly advanced, though this was owing to a general scarcity of the article. Yet all the possessors of tea, in order to give strength to the opposition, readily agreed to reduce the price and sell what remained in their hands at a reasonable rate. Nothing now remained but to keep up a proper correspondence and connection with the other colonies, and to take all prudent and proper precautions on the arrival of the tea ship. It is not easy to describe the anxiety and suspense of the city in this interval. Sundry reports of her arrival were received, which proved premature. But on Saturday evening last, an express came up from Chester to inform the town that the tea ship, commanded by Captain Ayres, with her detested cargo, was arrived there, having followed another ship up the river so far. The committee met early the next morning, and being apprised of the arrival of Mr. Gilbert Barclay, the other consignee, who came passenger in the ship, they immediately went in a body to request his renunciation of the commission. Mr. Barclay politely attended the committee at the first request, and being made acquainted with the sentiments of the city and the danger to which the public liberties of America were exposed by this measure, he, after expressing the particular hardship of his situation, also resigned the commission in a manner which affected every one present. The committee then appointed 3 of their members to go to Chester, and 2 others to Gloucester Point, in order to have the earliest opportunity of meeting Captain Ayres, and representing to him the sense of the public respecting his voyage and cargo. The gentlemen, who had set out for Chester, receiving intelligence that the vessel had weighed anchor about 12 o'clock, and proceeded to town, returned. About 2 o'clock she appeared in sight of Gloucester Point, where a number of inhabitants from the town had assembled with the gentlemen from the committee. As she passed along, she was hailed, and the captain requested not to proceed farther, but to come on shore. This the captain complied with, and was handed through a lane, made by the people, to the gentleman appointed to confer with him. They represented to him the general sentiments, together with the danger and difficulties that would attend his refusal to comply with the wishes of the inhabitants, and finally desired him to proceed with them to town, where he would be more fully informed of the temper and resolution of the people. He was accordingly accompanied to town by a number of persons, where he was soon convinced of the truth and propriety of the representations which had been made to him, and agreed that, upon the desire of the inhabitants being publicly expressed, he would conduct himself accordingly. Some small rudeness being offered to the captain afterwards in the street by some boys, several gentlemen interposed, and suppressed it before he received the least injury. Upon an hour's notice this morning, a public meeting was called, and the State House not being sufficient to hold the numbers assembled, they adjourned into the square. This meeting is allowed by all to be the most respectable, both in the numbers and rank of those who attended it, that has been known in this city. After a short introduction, the following resolutions were not only agreed to, but the public approbation testified in the warmest manner. First, resolved that the tea on board the ship Polly, Captain Ayres, shall not be landed. Second, that Captain Ayres shall neither enter nor report his vessel at the custom house. Third, that Captain Ayres shall carry back the tea immediately. Fourth, that Captain Ayres shall immediately send a pilot on board his vessel with orders to take charge of her and proceed with her to Reedy Island next high water. Fifth, that the captain shall be allowed to stay in town till tomorrow to provide necessaries for his voyage. Sixth, that he shall then be obliged to leave the town and proceed to his vessel and make the best of his way out of our river and bay. Seventh, that a committee of 4 gentlemen be appointed to see these resolves carried into execution. The assembly were then informed of the spirit and resolution of New York, Charlestown, South Carolina, and the conduct of the people of Boston, whereupon it was unanimously resolved that this assembly highly approve of the conduct and spirit of the people of New York, Charlestown, and Boston, and return their hearty thanks to the people of Boston for their resolution in destroying the tea rather than suffering it to be landed. The whole business was conducted with a decorum and order worthy the importance of the cause. Captain Ayres, being present at this meeting, solemnly and publicly engaged that he would literally comply with the sense of the city as expressed in the above resolutions. A proper supply of necessaries and fresh provisions being then procured, in about 2 hours the tea ship weighed anchor from Gloucester Point, where she lay within sight of the town, and has proceeded with her whole cargo on her return to the East India Company. The public think the conduct of those gentlemen whose goods are returned on board the tea ship ought not to pass unnoticed, as they have upon this occasion generously sacrificed their private interest to the public good. Thus this important affair, in which there has been so glorious an exertion of public virtue and spirit, has been brought to a happy issue, by which the force of a law, so obstinately persisted in to the prejudice of the national commerce, for the sake of the principle on which it is founded, a right of taxing the Americans without their consent, has been effectually broken, and the foundations of American liberty more deeply laid than ever. Wednesday, December 29th. Yesterday, at 2:30 o'clock in the afternoon, Captain Ayres left this city in a pilot boat in order to go on board his ship and proceed with the tea immediately for England. We hear that charity sermons for the poor of Christ Church and St. Peter's will be preached next Sunday at both churches, both forenoon and afternoon. We hear that in a few days will be published an examination of what is called the Susquehanna case, in which the claim of the colony of Connecticut to lands within the limits of the Pennsylvania Charter is shown to be groundless and vexatious, and the intrusions of their people unwarrantable. In this work, the Connecticut Charter will be examined, as well as the state of the case drawn up on behalf of that colony for the opinion of counsel in England. This day is published and sold by R. Aiken, bookseller, opposite the London Coffee House, Front Street. Aiken's General American Register and Calendar for the year 1774. Contents: the annual calendar interleaved with writing paper for gentlemen's memorandums, containing 12 pages, the days of the year, week, and month, remarkable days, aspects, with the sun's rising and setting, the moon's age, place, and rising, the gardener's calendar for Pennsylvania, containing many curious and useful directions for gardening, a genealogical list of the royal family of Great Britain, His Majesty's consuls abroad for the protection of trade, births, marriages, and issue of the sovereign princes of Europe, His Majesty's principal secretaries of state, lords commissioners of the treasury, of trade and plantations, and of the admiralty. List of the House of Peers in alphabetical order with their town residents. Alphabetical list of the House of Commons. List of His Majesty's most honorable Privy Council. A new and correct list of the Royal Navy of Great Britain. A compendious geographical description of the world. North American lists, general and civil establishment in North America, the staff of the Army, General Post Office, and list of the post offices in the Northern District of North America. Time of the post leaving Philadelphia and his arrival at each post office and stage till he comes to Annapolis and his return back. Time of the New York Post, Lancaster Post, and Eastern Shore, Maryland posts setting out from and returning to Philadelphia. Rank of the Navy and Army. His Majesty's order concerning the power of the civil governors over his forces in America. Rules for determining the rank and precedence to be observed between the officers of the Army and the civil governors. Correct lists of the officers and offices in Pennsylvania, Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts Bay, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, St. John's, Gulf of St. Lawrence, Canada, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, East Florida, and West Florida. Corporation for the relief of the widows and children of clergymen in the Communion of the Church of England in America. The United Churches of Christ Church and St. Peter's in the city of Philadelphia. St. Paul's Church, Philadelphia, a list of the ministers and congregations, whether settled or vacant, belonging to the Reverend Synod of New York and Philadelphia. The Baptist Philadelphia Association, a list of the ministers and congregations belonging to the Associate Presbytery of Pennsylvania, which is subordinated to the Associate Synod of Edinburgh in Scotland, and several curious and useful tables. Next we head to Connecticut, where discussions are being had at the Assembly regarding the borders of that colony. From the Connecticut Journal of December 3rd. To the printers, gentlemen, the following is a copy of instructions prepared by the selectmen of one of the most ancient towns in this colony to be voted in their annual town meeting for the regulation of their representatives at the adjourned session of the Assembly, and it is much to be hoped similar instructions will be given by every town in this colony at their annual town meeting. Your inserting this in your next will oblige many of your customers and none more than myself, who am a friend to the colony. Gentlemen, whereas we are credibly informed the Honorable the General Assembly of this colony have transmitted to our agent in Great Britain copies of all papers, records, and documents relative to our title and claim to the western lands, so-called, included in part in the purchase of the Susquehanna Company, stated our claim, and thereupon formed several queries, directing our said agent, at the sole cost and expense of this colony, to procure the opinion of gentlemen learned in the law thereon, and also answers to the several queries put, and that the General Assembly have since received the opinion of certain attorneys thereon, and answers to the queries sent, and in consequence thereof the Assembly have proceeded and resolved they will take those lands under their care and jurisdiction, and defend our title thereto against the claim of Mr. Penn, and also appointed a committee to wait on the governor of that province in order to pursue proper measures to decide that controversy. As we conceive measures are hastening fast, which may involve this colony in an expensive controversy, we remind you of the right we have to instruct our own representatives in matters of so high importance to the peace and interests of this colony. Although we have never seen the case stated, the questions put or answers made, which, in matters of so high importance, we conceive we ought to have been previously acquainted with before measures had been taken, which will so deeply affect the colony, and for that reason cannot form a judgment thereon. Nevertheless, these facts are well known, that King James in 1606 made a grant of North and South Virginia to the London and Plymouth companies, that the London Company resigned their charter, and the same was regranted to them to the 40° north latitude, 23rd of May, 1609. And on the 3rd of November, 1620, he regranted to the Plymouth Company from the 40° to the 48° north latitude inclusive. Both these grants were from sea to sea, from the Atlantic on the east to the South Sea on the west, which grants never were resigned by the subject, nor vacated by the Crown. Consequently, the right to those lands remain in the London and Plymouth companies, their heirs and assigns, and not in the Crown. Nevertheless, it is well known His present Majesty has made large grants of lands on the river Mississippi, and established a government which grants of land are within the limits of the last grant to the London Company. And we are also assured by repeated accounts from the London papers, there is also a government on the river Ohio, which is included in the present charter of Virginia, which is also bounded by charter to the South Sea, as well as this colony. From all which it is evident, notwithstanding the answers made to those queries, His Majesty's ministers do not suppose those lands granted to the London and Plymouth companies are holden by said grants, or that even the lands granted in the present charter of Virginia do actually extend to the South Sea. Consequently, there is no reasonable prospect this colony can support their claim to the South Seas. Moreover, we are of opinion the dispute will not be between this colony and Mr. Penn, the proprietor of that colony, but between this colony and the Crown. Wherefore, as this controversy will bring this colony under a heavy load of expense which at present we are not able to bear without the most distant prospect of success, and if success would be of no real advantage to this colony, as it would lessen the present value of our lands and involve us in inextricable difficulties with regard to the exercise of our present form of government, which cannot be exercised in so extensive a territory. Wherefore, as it is our undoubted right, we do hereby instruct you to use your utmost endeavors and influence at your adjourned session to stop all further proceedings in the premises. To be sold, and possession given in February next or sooner if required, the furnace situated in the township of Salisbury and province of Connecticut, New England, having been lately rebuilt on the most approved plan, all the conveniences about the same being either new or in good repair, together with all the utensils, and a complete set of patterns for hollow ware and other castings, the sole property of a piece of water from which the furnace is supplied, the area measuring 600 acres. A mansion house most agreeably situated, consisting of 4 rooms on a floor, a good garden, and other conveniences. 2 other houses for workmen, a store completely fitted for English and West India goods and provisions, a compting house, a large barn with stabling for horses and oxen, also a property in the bed of iron ore in said Salisbury, known by the ore grant, with an exclusive right of digging, raising, and carrying away ore from another bed, called Chatfield's ore bed, and the right of soil in a piece of land joining west on the ore grant, which contains iron ore. These beds all lie within 2 miles of the furnace, the roads good. Also, 753 acres of land, 300 of which are under improvement, and the whole well watered. The premises are situated in a healthy, fruitful, and pleasant country, on the high road from Hartford to Hudson's River in Albany, distant about 30 miles from the river. The quality of the iron made from the above ore is well known, both in England and America, to be equal to any made on this continent. The quantity of ore which lies near the surface appears inexhaustible. The country round is well supplied with wood for coal, and the regular supply of water at all seasons, without danger from floods, admits of the furnace being in blast all the year. The iron is excellent for potash kettles, sugar boilers for the West Indies, and military stores. The furnace not taking all the water, any additional works might be erected with great convenience and small expense. The rapid settlement of an extensive country to the north and northwest must daily increase the demand for every article usually cast at a furnace. An extensive trade may be introduced in English and West India goods, out of which the works might be supplied with stock and provisions, and carried on with more profit than such business can be in a country where there are few inhabitants. Also to be sold a complete double forge with 4 fires and 2 hammers now at work, together with all necessary utensils, situated in Colebrook, Connecticut, near the road from Hartford to the furnace, built in 1771 after the best model, with a good stream and head of water, and in case of need in very dry seasons, the privilege of a pond of water 5 miles in length for supplying of said forge. The like caution is observed to prevent the business being retarded in winter by having the wheels under cover, with large iron stoves and canals cut to take the surplus water. Adjacent to the forge there is a dwelling house with 4 rooms on a floor, a store and cellar, 4 houses for workmen, a barn, coal house, iron house, and blacksmith shop, all built in 1771. Also a sawmill and dwelling house at a small distance from the forge, with good situations for erecting other works on the same stream, together with 289 acres of land round the forge and sawmill, about 50 of which are under improvement. The forge is situated in the center of a large tract of woodland, surrounded with a cultivated country which is in want of bar iron, there being very little refined bar iron manufactured in Connecticut, and the consumption considerable. This estate, joined with that at Salisbury, is capable of many improvements. For further particulars, apply to Mr. Charles Staton, merchant in Philadelphia, Mr. Peter Vandervoort, merchant in New York, Mr. James Holmes at the Furnace, Mr. Jacob Ogden at the Forge, or Captain William Tilley in Hartford. Heading down to New Jersey, the General Assembly has prepared an address for the governor. To His Excellency William Franklin, Captain General, Governor and Commander-in-Chief in and over the province of New Jersey, and territories thereon, depending in America, Chancellor and Vice Admiral in the same. The humble address of His Majesty's Council for the said province. May it please your Excellency. We, His Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Council of the Province of New Jersey, beg leave to return our thanks for your Excellency's speech at the opening of this session, in which we discern such sentiments of zeal for the honor and real welfare of the province as justly call for our warmest acknowledgments and approbation. The mischievous consequences resulting to the public from the frequency of the crime of counterfeiting the current money of this and the neighboring colonies became of late so truly alarming that we must consider it a very fortunate event that some of the perpetrators of that crime have been apprehended and brought to justice in this province. The advantages to the public from the prosecution of those offenders will, we hope, be greatly augmented by the discovery of the robbery of the Eastern Treasury, which the confession of some of those criminals, confirmed by so many corroborating circumstances since brought to view, seem fully to evince. And we earnestly hope that the measures taken by government to attain the justice due to the public for the perpetration of such daring crimes may at length be crowned with that success which may reasonably be expected from endeavors so laudably exerted for that purpose. We heartily concur with your Excellency that the thanks and grateful acknowledgments of the public are due to those magistrates and others whose zeal in the cause of public justice, exerted in the several prosecutions alluded to in your speech, respect the highest honor upon themselves and must be productive of very beneficial consequences to the public. We have so high a sense of the merit and services of those gentlemen that we think them entitled to more substantial marks of the favor of government than mere thanks and commendations. As it must ever be consistent with sound policy and with the principles of good government to encourage by every persuasive incitement zeal to maintain and resolution to enforce those laws upon the due execution of which secret villainies and open violences may be detected and brought to justice. We trust, sir, that a disposition for harmony and moderation so essential to the regular dispatch of public business, and which this House would ever wish to convince your Excellency they are actuated by, will be evidenced in their transactions of this session, and be perfectly consistent with the duty we owe to our sovereign, to the public, and to our own station. By order of the House, Peter Kemble, Speaker. December 10th, 1773. To which His Excellency was pleased to make the following reply. Gentlemen, I return you my hearty thanks for this obliging address. The experience I have had of your attention to the public good convinces me that I may always rely on your assistance in promoting the reputation and prosperity of the province, and it ever affords me pleasure to find my opinion in public matters concurring with your sentiments, and my public conduct meeting with your approbation. By His Excellency William Franklin, a proclamation. Whereas His Majesty, by his order in council at St. James, bearing date the 1st day of September last, hath been graciously pleased, with the advice of his privy council, to declare his royal approbation and allowance of an act of the legislature of this province, passed in September 1772, entitled, An Act to enable all persons who are His Majesty's liege subjects, either by birth or naturalization, to inherit and hold real estates, notwithstanding any defect of purchases made before naturalization within this colony. And whereas His Majesty, by one other order in council at St. James, bearing date the said 1st day of September last, hath been pleased with the advice of his privy council to declare his royal disallowance of 3 other acts of the legislature of this province, passed in August and September 1772, entitled as follow. An act for the relief of Benjamin Ayres, now a prisoner in the jail of the county of Cumberland. An act to naturalize John George Felthausen. An act to dissolve the marriage of David Baxter with Margaret his wife, late Margaret McMurtry. I have therefore thought fit, by and with the advice and consent of His Majesty's Council for this province, to publish His Majesty's gracious allowance and affirmance of the act first above mentioned, and His Majesty's royal disallowance and repeal of the said 3 last mentioned acts by proclamation, to the end that all His Majesty's subjects, whom it may concern, may take notice thereof and govern themselves accordingly. Given under my hand and seal at arms in the city of Burlington, the 3rd day of December, in the 14th year of the reign of our sovereign Lord George III of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, William Franklin. By His Excellency's command, Charles Pettit, Secretary. God save the King. Nearby, in Annapolis, Maryland, 7 ships arrived there and 4 were cleared by the Custom House. The citizens of Maryland this week are learning of the full proceedings of the late November town meetings in Boston that we discussed in previous episodes. We now head to Williamsburg, Virginia, where the citizens there are also learning about the late November Boston town meetings. A Constitutional Catechism. Query: why do the Americans refuse the importation of English tea at this time? The answer: because it is saddled with a duty, which is a tax for the purpose of raising a revenue from us without our consent, and such tax or duty is therefore unconstitutional, cruel, and unjust. Query: who assumed to themselves this power of taxing us without our own consent? Answer: the British Parliament, who in so doing assume a power destructive of the very frame of their own constitution, for such a power is totally inconsistent with the general liberty, whereby no part of the king's subjects can tax another without their consent. How do you prove the tea duty to be unconstitutional? Because it is a tax in direct opposition to a fundamental maxim of the British Constitution, whereby we can only be taxed by our own consent or that of our own representatives. How do you prove the tea duty to be cruel? First, because to tax us without our consent is treating us like enemies and forcing us to be such who are the natural friends of Great Britain. Secondly, because this duty is an additional sum imposed upon us only, for all the world may have this tea at the common market price without any duty, the poor Americans only excepted. And thirdly, because it is treating us similar to that of an enemy's laying a conquered people under contribution. How do you prove the tea duty to be unjust? Because it is forcing our property from us without our own consent by virtue of power alone, which is no less a crime in the scale of justice than downright robbery. But, as children of Great Britain, ought we not to submit to her assumed right of taxing us without our own consent? We ought not to submit, for if we are children of Great Britain, we are by birthright entitled to an equal share of all the privileges of her happy constitution. But an equal share of those privileges we cannot enjoy, nor indeed any share of them at all, if we grant a right in her or in any other power to tax or make laws for us without our consent. Have our fellow subjects of Great Britain, by reason of our being descended from them as a free people, any right to our property? None at all, for our being descended from them, considered as a nation of free men, can never subject us to slavery, because free men can never beget slaves. But could we ever suppose our mother country to be a nation of slaves? In that case we still must be free, for slaves can have no real property. Therefore, in either case, whether we consider ourselves descended from Great Britain as from a land of liberty or slavery, Americans still must be free. If it be unconstitutional, cruel, and unjust to lay duties upon us, or to tax us without our consent, is it not incumbent upon us to defend our common property from all such impositions? Yes, because it is much the duty of the whole people to defend and preserve their common property, as it is that of an individual to defend and preserve his private property from the unconstitutional, cruel, and unjust attacks of a highwayman. But what ways and means should we exert ourselves in the defense of our common property when attacked by unjust power? By all such ways and means as we shall judge to be most likely to promote the important end of securing that property. But can you prove that the people have a right to be their own judges as to the ways and means necessary to preserve their property from unjust power? Yes, from the nature of property itself, for property necessarily implies a right in those who have it to defend it. If then they who have property have a right to defend it, they must have the same right to the choice of means for that end, but they cannot have a right to the choice of means unless they have a right to judge of those means. Therefore the people have a right to be their own judges as to the ways and means necessary to preserve their property from unjust power. But ought we not always to measure our opposition to unjust power against our property by the laws of the land? Yes, when the laws of the land prescribe sufficient means by which we can secure our property, and when the executors of these laws are faithful to their trust, but when the laws of the land do not prescribe means sufficient to secure our property, or if they do, when the executors of these laws are unfaithful to their trust, in either case, consistent with the security of our property, we cannot measure our opposition to unjust power against it by the laws of the land, but only by the perpetual and universal binding law of self-defense, which law has been, and ever will be, the sole director of every people when their rights and properties cannot be secured by the laws of their country. Noted, the author of the above queries has no design by exhibiting them to the public but the general good of the British Empire, not the advantage of a part only to the destruction of the liberties of the rest. December 30th, last Monday being the feast of St. John the Evangelist, the ancient and honorable society of free and accepted Masons, all habited alike and in the proper insignia of their order, went in procession from their lodge in this city to Bruton Church, where an excellent discourse delivered by the Reverend Mr. Andrews, a brother Mason, was preached from Hebrews 13th, "Let brotherly love continue." After divine service, they returned to their lodge and dined together, after which they gave a ball and elegant entertainment to a number of ladies, and spent the evening with that harmony, decorum, and friendly intercourse which characterize the brotherhood, and are so agreeable to the laws of Masonry. We hear from Maryland that the Assembly of that province have granted £4,000 for the lighthouse at Cape Henry, and passed an inspection law which is to take place the 1st day of January. Benjamin Ogle and Philip Thomas Lee are sworn into the council there. Marriages: Peter Lyons of Hanover to Miss Judith Bassett of this city, a lady of great merit. Deaths: Mr. Robert Middleton of Westmoreland in his 71st year, long a vestryman of Copel parish. He endured a lingering illness with much Christian fortitude. Also Mr. John Camp of this city after a tedious indisposition. From the Williamsburg Poets' Corner, a sketch of human life. The various seasons of the year, as they successively appear, life's stages as they roll display, and much morality convey. In spring we bud, in summer blow, and in the prime of manhood glow. In autumn we in part decay, and winter sweeps us quite away. A soliloquy. Who? What am I? Where came I from? How fearfully and wonderfully made! Did I make myself? No, I was made before I was endued with consciousness. Who then made me? Where is he? Who made him? If he is the first and the last, Alpha and Omega, whence does he derive his beginning? The remotest cause of all proceeding and created things must have existed from all eternity. Eternity, O incomprehensible word! O inexplicable reason, staggering idea! I see, I hear, I feel, I smell, I taste, I apprehend, though imperfectly, the deity on all sides. Whence spring these innumerable beauties which surround me? Lay hold of the chain of causes, O my soul, quick as angel's flight, trace the mysterious links, till thou findest the great first cause, God the Creator. Full of rapturous transports and reverential awe, fall prostrate and adore him who was and is to come. Who speaks in thunder and whirlwinds and storms and tempests? It is the Almighty's voice, it is the trumpet of God. What do I feel that invisibly surrounds me that seems so cool and comfortable? It is the breath of God which animates me, it is life itself. Whence do those fragrant perfumes which so pleasingly assault my olfactory faculties derive their origin? They are the offspring of heaven, bountifully sent down to us in showers and rays of light. In return, we should send up the grateful incense of praise and adoration. Whence is that pleasing gratification taste derived? From the same gracious cause who thus vouches to feed all his creatures, even the young ravens which call upon him. I find I am not endued with locomotive powers, but where is the main spring, the primum mobile, which sets the whole machine a-going? Whence is the vital principle derived? Whence the circulation of my blood, and the involuntary sensations both of pain and pleasure? Would you see mechanism in its utmost perfection? Examine yourselves. Admire the just proportion, the exact symmetry, the subordinate dependence, the uniform regularity which forms your harmonious whole. If you are made thus perfect, was it for the reception of disorderly lusts and vicious impurities? No, certainly. I can remember when I was small, innocent, and unacquainted with disquietude. How then am I become bigger, more vicious, and more unhappy? How was I thus transubstantiated? Why made capable of transgressing, if transgressions were to be my ruin? Why is my heart disquieted within me if I was created to be happy? Reason tells me that I am a free agent. Conscience whispers that I have abused that glorious privilege. Justly then are we punished. Why was I created with impetuous passions if they are not to be gratified? Because reason is to hold the reins and repress their wild efforts. I am told I am to die. I see daily people expiting on all sides. Strange that we should never know what becomes of them, and stranger still that we should not care what becomes of us. We may study, contemplate, reflect, and admire sublunary things, but there the curtain drops, and beyond it all is gloomy uncertainty. The texture of this is too fine for corporal organs. When death shall have refined and spiritualized us, we shall then depart beyond this envious boundary, and our faculties will be enlarged. The prospect will expand, and we shall find incorruptible food for our souls to all eternity. I will reflect frequently and seriously upon these things. I will admire and adore the omnipotent, all-wise creative being. As I grow wiser, I will endeavor to grow better. This alone is worthy the whole attention of a rational being. Reflect, ye readers, and go and do likewise. Finally, we head to Charlestown, South Carolina, where 3 ships arrived in the harbor, 18 left, 6 cleared the custom house, 13 will sail soon, and 30 other vessels are in the port. Camden District, November Session, 1773. It is ordered that the presentments of the grand jury for this district be published in the several gazettes of this province. John Oglethorpe. The presentments of the grand jurors for the body of this district at a court of general sessions of the peace, oyer and terminer, assize and general jail delivery, begun and holden at Camden on the 5th of November, 1773. We, the grand jurors for the district of Camden, do make and certify to the court the following presentments. First, we present as a very great grievance to the back inhabitants of this province that there are no laws in force for compelling idle and disorderly vagrants to take some honest method for gaining a subsistence, instead of constantly hunting in the woods and destroying deer for their skins, especially when they do it in the night by firelight, whereby great numbers of cattle are destroyed and the lives of people endangered. Second, we present as a grievance the want of more salutary and effectual laws for preventing all kind of hunting in the night time, the present laws being found, from experience, not sufficient for that purpose. Third, we present as a grievance the want of a more equal and general jury list, the present not including a great number of fit and proper persons to serve as jurors, especially those who reside between the Wateree and Congaree rivers, with very few of whom are among the present list of jurors for that district. Fourth, we present as a grievance that horse stealing is not sufficiently guarded against by the Toll Act. Fifth, we present as a grievance that the expense of clearing and preserving the navigation of the Wateree River is assessed only upon those inhabitants living within 10 miles of the banks on each side of it, such inhabitants being liable at the same time, if directed by the road commissioners, to work on the several highways to which they belong, and as the navigation of the said river is a matter in which the province in general is interested, we earnestly recommend that the preservation of the same may be made a public expense, especially as the clearing of the said navigation frequently endangers the lives of those slaves that are liable to work thereon, they not being qualified for that business. Sixth, we present as a grievance that several magistrates in this district make a practice of marrying people, and that without a license or publication, whereby we apprehend the established clergymen are defrauded of their fees, and the laws prohibiting the same violated. Seventh, we recommend the publication of these our presentments in the several gazettes of this province, and also that they be laid before the Honorable the Commons House of Assembly. Cheraws District, November Session, 1773. It is ordered that the presentments of the grand jury for this district be published in the several gazettes of this province. H. W. Harrington. The presentments of the grand jurors for the body of this district at a court of general sessions of the peace, oyer, and terminer, assize and general jail delivery begun and holden at the Long Bluff, Cheras, on the 15th day of November, 1773. First, we present as a grievance the want of a vagrant act in this province, this district in particular being infested with many vagrants who do great damage, particularly by fire hunting. Second, we present as a grievance that the division line lately run between this district and the district of Georgetown does not extend lower down Petit River than 16 or 17 miles from the courthouse, which we humbly apprehend was not originally intended in the division of the districts in this province, and therefore do recommend that this matter be taken into consideration by the legislature. We present as a very great grievance the want of a free school in this district. Fourth, we present as a grievance the want of a law for clearing Petit River, its navigation at present being very unsafe. Fifth, we present as a grievance the want of a bridge over Thompson's Creek near Colonel Stewart's mill, and another over Black Creek near the present ferry. Sixth, we present as a grievance the present insufficiency of the jail of this district, by which persons confined therein are enabled to make their escape, and we do recommend that it be surrounded by a sufficient wall, at a convenient distance therefrom, to prevent the confederates of the prisoners from furnishing them with implements for breaking the same. Seventh, we present as a grievance the want of a new jury list in this district. We recommend that these our presentments be published in the several gazettes of this province. Charlestown, December 27th. The gentleman in this town, to whom the East India Company's tea brought by Captain Curling was consigned for sale upon being convinced that the receiving or selling the said tea in this province, while subject to the payment of a duty upon its being landed here, for the purpose of raising a revenue in America by Act of Parliament, would be extremely disagreeable to the inhabitants in general, having generously, even since the 3rd of this month, as we before acquainted our readers, declined to receive or have anything to do with the said consignment, the time being elapsed last Tuesday, within which the said duty was required to be paid, and no person having offered to pay the same, it either became the duty of the collector of His Majesty's Customs, or was an instruction to that gentleman from the Boston Board of Commissioners to take the said tea, upon which the duty had not been paid, into his charge, and to lodge the same in a king's warehouse. Accordingly, on Wednesday morning, very early, the hoisting out of the ship's hold, delivery to the king's officers, and landing by the collector was begun, and the whole 257 chests were put on shore, carried up in drays, stowed away, and locked up in a cellar under the exchange, hired for that purpose with so much expedition, that the whole was completed by the time that the people in general imagined it would be begun. Indeed, there never was an instance here of so great a number of packages being taken out of any vessel, and thus disposed of in so short a time. The sheriff and other peace officers, we hear, had particular instructions given to them, in case there should be a disposition to obstruct the landing of the teas by the collector in any way that could be deemed a breach of the peace. But the people, though not pleased with seeing it landed at all, were perfectly quiet, as they did upon the tea being taken into the charge of the collector, and do still confidently rely upon its remaining locked up in the cellar where it is now lodged, until orders may arrive, after the East India Company shall have received advice of its present disposition to reship it for England, or until, by a proper attention to their interest, and an exertion of their influence, they shall have prevailed upon Parliament to repeal the impolitic and offensive duty, which is the only thing that can afford the company any flattering prospects or promote its meditated extension of trade in America, and would at the same time put an entire and sudden stop to the practice of smuggling, so very injurious to the commercial as well as the political greatness of our mother country. For it is beyond dispute, although this province is not addicted to smuggling with foreigners, that where the Americans have purchased one chest of tea that paid the present duty, since it was first imposed, they have consumed 50 that has been procured from the Dutch, Danes, and others, and it is most certain that could it be worth the immense expense attending it, to station the whole navy of England to watch the avenues to illicit trade on this extensive continent, even that would be insufficient. And that concludes the news from America. Let's now head to London, England, for some news out of Europe. As usual, the news for Europe is a couple months old due to the time it took to reach our shores here in America. London, October 4th. Extract of a letter from Warsaw, October 2nd. Almost all the treaties with the three powers are now signed by the ministers and by the delegation, but these treaties only respect some particular matters as to the claims of the respective potentates. The essential affairs of the kingdom are by no means yet settled. The power of the delegates was generally misunderstood. They had no concern to settle the form of government that is left to the Grand Diet, who have been discussing of it several days, are now sitting, and will not conclude at soonest till the end of this month. Extract of a letter from Danzig, Poland, September 28th. Orders are received here from Berlin that all the soldiers of our garrison who were born in His Prussian Majesty's new dominions, or even in the suburbs of Danzig, immediately enter into the Prussian service under pain of being treated as deserters, and that the magistrates must answer for their conduct if they continue them any longer in their service. This order greatly embarrasses the magistrates, as our whole garrison is composed of men born either in Polish Prussia or the suburbs of the city. In short, it is all over with our once flourishing city, and all hope is lost. October 18th. It should seem the Pope is in some fear from the Jesuits, for on the 22nd of last month, when he set out for Castel Gandolfo, a country seat belonging to His Holiness, orders were issued that no Jesuit should be suffered to be at Albane or near the neighborhood of Castel Gandolfo. And for greater safety, a detachment of Corsican soldiers is ordered to be quartered at Albano while His Holiness continues there. His Majesty set out from Kew on Saturday morning last to visit his royal dockyard at Deptford, where he arrived at half after 9 o'clock and was met by the First Lord of the Admiralty and the Comptroller and Surveyor of the Navy. His Majesty employed 4 hours in viewing the several works carrying on, which he examined with particular attention and expressed the greatest satisfaction thereat. The man of war appointed to carry out the judges to India is ready and will sail the beginning of November. General Clavering, however, does not go out till February, by which time, as it will be the first thing Parliament will enter on, there will be a clause added to the late East India Bill empowering that gentleman to go out as Commander-in-Chief of the forces in India. The salary of the judges commences the moment they go on board. October 21st. It is a fact as curious as it is extraordinary that our American colonists begin already to look forward to an era which they think will be signalized by an emancipation from the tyranny of Britain. The narrow policy and the confused government of the mother country, in conjunction with the tide of luxury which is hastily overwhelming every rank of the nation, will be sufficient to sweep the British government to its dissolution, at least enervate it so greatly that resistance will be in vain. On the contrary, everything in America is tending to its aggrandizement, and, as if fate were resolved to hasten the existence of this wretched country to a period, the Highlanders, the only people in Europe who are born soldiers, are forsaking it to populate and cultivate the rival country. It is not alleged that it is possible this can happen immediately, but it is impossible that it should not happen after the lapse of some years. It was once thought that peace and plenty went always together. This is found at length to be false, for though we have plenty of peace, where is the plenty of victuals? A correspondent says, I remember to have heard it prophesied that this nation before the year 1778 would be the richest in the universe, for before that time the poor would be all starved to death, and when I reflect that bread and strong beer are necessary for the support of the lower class of people, and that combinations are everywhere forming to deprive them of both, or which is the same, put it out of their power to purchase, I tremble for the consequence, and can see no means left to defeat this dreadful prophecy, except in the wisdom and integrity of a new Parliament. On Friday last arrived in the river from Quebec, the Active, Frampton, with a cargo of wheat, being the first vessel that ever came from that part with grain. Extract of a letter from The Hague, October 16th. Sir Joseph Yorke, ambassador from Great Britain, having presented a memorial to the States General requesting them to appoint proper persons to settle a dispute which has arisen between the English Royal African Company and our West India Company concerning the trade in that part of the world, their high mightinesses have appointed 2 gentlemen, who are accordingly gone to England on that business. Great quantities of gold coin are now sending to the American colonies, on which account an additional furnace has been erected in the Mint Office at the Tower, where 3 furnaces are now at work, in each of which 800 ounces of gold are melted every day. It is reported that one of His Majesty's sloops lately fell in with a pirate off the Madeiras, whom she took after a very obstinate engagement. The crew are said to consist of French, Irish, and Spaniards. By letters from Petersburg, we learned that the Empress has given orders for valuable presents to be distributed among the officers both in the land and sea service who have, by their conduct and courage, signalized themselves in the war against the Turks. Extract of a letter from Danzig, October 12th. This once independent and flourishing city is now in a state of the most miserable distress. The age of liberty has passed away, and that of the most violent arbitrary power has succeeded. The insolent violence and inhumanity of the officers of a certain power in every department is beyond description. A few people having gathered near the custom-house yesterday to prevent the punishing an inhabitant for some small crime were fired amongst by a party of Prussian soldiers, when 4 were killed and many severely wounded. The correspondent says, an attempt by poison has been lately made on the life of His Holiness the Pope by one of his domestics, which was providentially prevented. Advices from Holland mention an engagement near Malta between some French and Russian ships of force, but that the particulars are not yet known. October 22nd. The Parliament is expected to meet for the dispatch of business the 19th or 20th of January. One of their first objects, it is said, will be a regulation of the silver coin. A commission is said to be preparing to appoint General Keppel Commander-in-Chief of His Majesty's forces in Ireland. We hear that General Clavering will sail in a few days with the rest of the officers for Bengal, matters being accommodated between government and the India Company. October 23rd, a letter from Germany mentions that the King of Prussia has determined on taking away the country of Diefold from the Principality of Osnaburg and threatens the like to Ravensburg. They write from Paris that there had been strong debates in an assembly of the Sorbonne, the beginning of this month, with respect to the bull for the extinction of the Jesuits. Some of the doctors declared the bull to be dictated from worldly policy to which His Holiness ought not to have given his consent. A bishop, distinguished by the strictness of his principles, has printed a pastoral letter against the above bull, but the king has forbade its publication. October 25th, a council is summoned to meet on Wednesday on the affairs of Ireland. October 26th, it was yesterday reported at St. James that His Majesty had sent a congratulatory letter to His Holiness the Pope for his spirited conduct in suppressing the Jesuits. We are assured by a person who pretends to speak from the most authentic information that nothing has prevented the resignation of Lord North since his difference with the friends of the late Duke of Bedford in March last relative to India affairs, but waiting to fix on a proper person to succeed him. A snow packet from La Vera Cruz to Cadiz brings a remarkable article of intelligence that a large body of native Mexicans, joined with some Creole Spaniards, have revolted and made themselves masters of Merida in Mexico. By several recent dispatches from Paris we learn that something bordering upon a revolution has been attempted at Versailles, and the Counts of Vienna, Madrid, and Turin were at the bottom of it. The objects of this combination or conspiracy were two, that is, either to have forced the King of France instantly to declare war against Great Britain, or in case of refusal, to have seized his person. The dispatches actually mention that the Duke de Broglio, Count de Gyges, and 2 other noblemen had in effect so far got the French king into their possession that the Duke de Broglio absolutely told His Majesty that he would go to Turin as ambassador extraordinary, and that the Count de Gyges must and should depart that very instant for the court of Great Britain. Happily for the king, the Duke d'Aiguillon, who had previously intimated to His Majesty the general outlines of this conspiracy, had obtained a letter de cachet a few minutes before these bold demands upon the king were made by the Duke de Broglio, when the king, seeing the necessity of seeming to give way to the Duke de Broglio, pretended to yield himself up entirely to him. The Duke, overjoyed with this conquest, was going from the king's apartments, but to his great astonishment was presented with the letter de cachet in less than a minute de par le roi. The denouncement of this plot seems to account for Lord Stormont's long absence from the court of Versailles, for had it succeeded, and had Lord Stormont been there on the spot, it is far from being improbable but his person, or at least his papers, would have been seized. Extract of a letter from Worcester. On Tuesday last, the following gentlemen were nominated at the Town Hall to succeed the late Mr. Crabbe Bolton in Parliament: Mr. Kelly, Mr. Withers, and Mr. Rose. The numbers were almost 20 to 1 in favour of Mr. Kelly. the other candidates being very much hissed while he was carried in triumph through the city by the free men who filled the air with liberty, trade, and Kelly forever. A letter received last Friday from Bruges by a gentleman at the west end of the town assures us that on the night preceding the date of the letter, at 10 o'clock, all the superiors of the English College of Jesuits in that town were suddenly expelled and turned into the street, to the great surprise and amazement not only of themselves, but of the whole town. The students, or young Jesuits, were suffered to remain, but they resented the inhuman treatment of their superiors so much that they tore and destroyed almost all the windows, rooms, and furniture, and afterwards deserted the college to take their fate along with their superiors. The shepherdess Wright, from Baltimore and Maryland, with tobacco, flaxseed, rice, and lumber for this port, was overset the 9th of last month in a gale of wind off Ushant on the French coast and totally lost. The captain and crew were taken up by a West Indiaman from Martinico and carried next day into Nantes. September 9th. Letters from Petersburg mention that a nobleman of rank in the empire lately got up from his dinner and shot a gentleman who dined with him, and afterwards shot himself. On searching his bureau, papers were found which explained that he entertained a jealousy of criminal conversation between his friend and his wife. We hear from Edinburgh that there is now growing at New Paso in Tweedale, the seat of Sir James Naismith, a promising tea tree, also a Magnolia glauca, in the open ground in full perfection. This beautiful and fragrant plant has been 3 weeks in flower and has already blown above 100 flowers. We are also informed the same plant has come to perfection at Dunkeld, the seat of His Grace the Duke of Athol, where this summer that very singular plant, the Foracina purpurea, flowered, and came to equal beauty as in the swamps of America, and also the Cereus grandiflorus, the most splendid flower that nature ever produced. September 15th. On Saturday, the 4th of this month, General de Sagaliers ordered the battalion of the Royal Artillery under his command to be under arms at 9 in the morning on Woolwich Common, previous to which a long, heavy 3-pounder was appropriated for the purpose of trying some curious and hitherto unknown experiments with case shot against a target of wood, representing the whole extent of a battalion of infantry. The battalion, commanded by General Pattison, marched 300 paces in such form and regularity as is customary to do in the presence of an active and vigilant enemy, during which time General de Sagaliers' ingenious apparatus, which I judge imprudent to explain, applied to the 3-pounder above mentioned, fired 32 rounds of case shot in 1 minute and 53 seconds against the target, with such uncommon effect as to put on a medium 7 or 8 shot through every square foot at the distance of 300 yards. A report prevails that Lord Sandwich will retire from his employ as soon as all his regulations in the Navy are finished. September 17th. We hear that the noble Duke of Richmond, who has lately taken a considerable lead in Asiatic affairs, means to fight it out inch by inch this next winter with the partisans of government, and there is no doubt, should his endeavors be crowned with that success they deserve, if he cannot sing Te Deum, he will be enabled to harass the enemy in the pursuit. October 4th. We are informed that Governor Pownall is not to return to Boston, and that no alteration will yet take place in that government. The rigid discipline observed with a certain heir apparent the Prince of Wales is very singular, for he is never permitted to quit the presence of his governor but under the greatest restrictions, though the Bishop of Osnaburg, his brother, is granted every indulgence. October 6th. An eminent chemist of this city has lately discovered a dye which will answer all the purposes of cochineal, and is extracted from a root which is the growth of this kingdom. October 11th, we hear that it was lately determined in Council to order the Crown Engineers to transmit home fresh surveys of the several British colonies, and to make drafts thereof with the dockyards and new works for the inspection of government, as also an account of the stores and the computed number of the white inhabitants in each province. Thus are the Crown Engineers like to become as spies among us. And now for some more news from Europe out of other places. Rome, September 28th. The Abbé Ricci, ex-general of the Jesuits, has been conveyed, with his companion, in the night of the 23rd of this month, under a guard of soldiers, to the castle of St. Angelo, whither likewise was conducted the same night and in the same manner the Abbé Romberg, assistant for Germany, and the following night the same ceremony was used with the assistants for Italy, Poland, Portugal, and Spain. The Pope has sent some presents to the cardinals, entrusted with the management of the affairs of the Jesuits, for the pains and trouble they had in that business. Naples, September 28th. Their Sicilian Majesties returned from the island of Procida on Saturday last in the afternoon, remained here that night, and removed early next day to Portici. The day of their Majesties' return to the city, an account was brought from Sicily of a revolution at Palermo, the people having been discontented at the high price of provisions, some essential articles of which at times were totally wanting, owing to monopolizers, one of whom had laden 2 ships with cheese for Naples, which produced a great scarcity of that necessary article at Palermo. These ships, however, were stopped just without the harbor, and their cargoes sold at the market price to the people by order of the praetor Prince Cassaro, who was soon after seized with a strangury and died the 20th of this month. This nobleman having been attended during his illness by the viceroys, the Marquis de Fogliani's surgeon, a suspicion arose amongst the rioters that the viceroy wished his death, whereupon they proceeded to the number of about 30,000 to the viceroy's palace, where the Prince Pietro Persia, son of the Prince of Butera, a young Sicilian nobleman of about 20 years of age, happened to be with the viceroy. This young nobleman, seeing them enter the apartment, resolutely asked what they would have, and upon being answered, the life of the viceroy, and finding they proceeded to acts of violence, threw his arms round the viceroy and in a firm tone demanded, in the name of his family, that they should forbear, saying, "Spare the life of this innocent old man, or first take mine." This spirited conduct checked their fury, and they agreed to spare the viceroy's life on his account, but insisted that he should instantly quit the kingdom. Upon which the prince attended him to the waterside, where a Genoese vessel was prepared to receive him. 3 of the monopolizers' goods, furniture, plate, were thrown into the fire, and the rioters, having detected one of their number secreting some of their effects, immediately put him to death, which was the only life lost during the tumult. After this, the rioters proclaimed the archbishop for their viceroy. Warsaw, October 6th. According to several letters which arrived here by yesterday's post, the Generals Soltikow and Suwarrow, who had passed the Danube, have repassed that river after having gained some advantages over the Turks. These letters, which do not contain any particulars relative to the expedition of General Soltikow, give an account that General Suwarrow hath entirely defeated a body of 11,000 Turks, taken 2 Bashaws prisoners, and carried off many trophies. Dresden, October 4th. Letters from Moldavia advise that the Austrians have taken possession of the castle of Choksim, where there were 400 Russians. They add that the conclusion of the peace between the 2 belligerent powers is still at a great distance. Berlin, October 5th. The king has considerably augmented his army without creating 1 new officer, by adding 40 men to each company, which now consists of 210 men, and before only of 170, which makes an augmentation of 40 to 50,000 men, and increases the Prussian forces to the number of 200,000 men, among whom are all the best men taken out of the different garrisons, who have been replaced by some of the recruits raised in Poland. All these troops are exercised daily to the admiration of all the beholders. The largest bodies seem to move and fire as if there was but 1 man. The Prussian troops have been long famed for great exactness in their exercises, but what they were before is nothing in comparison to what they are now. Rome, October 6. We learn from Valtellina that after the Pope's brief for the extinction of the Society of Jesuits had been read there, the people, notwithstanding the Pope's order, had the impudence to plunder the houses of the Jesuits, which put the ecclesiastics in fear of their lives and obliged them to fly. From the Danube, October 6th, Field Marshal Count Romanzow remains still in his old quarters on the banks of the Danube, where he expects by the 16th of this month to receive a reinforcement of 1,500 men from Poland. It is asserted that he has orders to pass the Danube when the above body has joined him. We have no confirmation of 40,000 Prussians being to march into Poland. Constantinople, October 5th. 300 Asiatic horsemen having crossed the canal near the city, who came from the Grand Vizier's army, it was given out that the troops were successively abandoning the army, and that the Janissaries had revolted and were on their march hither to demand the pay that was due to them, but that they had been stopped by the Capigilis Caiaphas, who had distributed great sums among them. The whole of the above, however, on enquiry was found to be entirely groundless. On the contrary, the greatest tranquillity reigns in the army, and the above horsemen appeared to be volunteers, who had left the camp on account of the want of forage. That's all for this week's episode. Check back next week for more stories on the past on It's Old News. And if you want to send us an email, you can send it to usahistory250@gmail.com. See you next week.